Hey all, here OS Reviews. Today we are taking a closer look at the DoDoDuck 1. This is a smart AI translator that has a 3-inch display, which is touch sensitive, and it's technically running on Android. It allows us to translate in over 107 languages and supports 12 languages offline. Now, this unit sells for $99, which I think is a fair price compared to some other smart translators we've seen from companies like Lingogo, in addition to the Travis Touch, which is also another popular competitor in this space. But what makes this one unique is it actually has a camera on the back, so you can use this to scan text to translate. So in addition to using voice translation, it also supports image translation. There's also learning modes built onto this device, which allows you to learn how to speak English or Chinese, and there's probably more languages coming soon. So there's actually some textbooks which are built in as apps, which will then detect and hear you when it prompts you to speak and learn certain phrases, and it will tell you if you're pronouncing those words correctly or not. The packaging is quite simple, and inside we have just the DoDoDuck 1 unit itself, which we can take a closer look at. It also comes with a micro USB cable for charging. So let's begin by taking a closer look at the design. Overall, it's pretty comfortable. It's actually one of the few smart translators which has a very premium construction. It's actually coated in a aluminum alloy chunk as a unibody, and we have Gorilla Glass in the front. So built really like a smartphone that feels very premium compared to, say, the Lingogo, which is made entirely out of plastic by contrast. But again, what makes it unique compared to, say, a smartphone would be really the offline translation function. Easier to just click on to do an instant translation compared to fiddling around with controls and opening up certain apps. It's free from other distractions, lasting for a little bit longer, will also probably still be a pretty compelling reason to consider something like it. Now anyways, on the rear here we have the camera, which is autofocus enabled, and an LED torch, a nice little feature here to illuminate images in the dark. There's also the micro USB port for charging on the top, although I do wish it was using Type-C. There's also the speaker on the bottom and a microphone, and that's pretty much it. The side here does feature the power on-off key, which is pretty tactile and responsive, and then there is that antenna band, which is running across the camera there. Now, one thing I will say is that the DoDoDuck 1 does not come with cellular connectivity options, unlike the aforementioned Lingogo and the Travis Touch, which both support 4G LTE. So if you're, again, not connected to the Wi-Fi, it can also support a eSIM card, compared to on this one here, which is reliant on Wi-Fi. And part of the reason why the cost is also lower. Again, $99 compared to the Lingogo, which sells around $250. So you are talking about a pretty considerable saving there in the cost. The screen size is also on the larger side for these smart translators. It fits very well in the hand. It is 3 inches, and otherwise it's capacitive and offers pretty good viewing angles. It is an IPS panel, so no issues in terms of looking at content, and also is very responsive in terms of the touch interactions. Very gentle taps and swipes are registered without any problems, and because it is just optimized and locked down only to these translation features, it remains snappy since you're not going to be downloading anything. There's no drag down notification shade either, so it really just is locked down to these modes. Now down below we have all the controls, including this carousel. Basically these are 4-way keys in addition to a center OK button. They allow us to control the volume a bit more easily. And then the left and right sides allow you to translate. Tapping on me will allow you to speak in your mother tongue. So for example, I can speak in English and translate that into, say, Chinese or Spanish. And then this button here is for the other person to tap on and to speak in their language, and it will translate into yours through the software here. So these are the controls for speaking between the two people. Now I do think that these two keys perhaps could be a bit more differentiated from the rest of the controls, just because right now they are kind of easy to just be confused since they don't have the most obvious difference among themselves. And also the tactile feedback, since this is a part of this ring, is also a little bit shallow. But aside from that, overall it looks quite sleek and doesn't have too many issues in terms of usability. So let's take a closer look at the software here. We have just the main time and date, connection status. We can also change the language list from here. I can tap on this icon here to reverse. So the English right now is my language. It will translate into Chinese for the other person. I can also tap on the language itself to go through a longer list of the 107 languages which are in this rolling list here, including various dialects for different countries. I did feel that this was considerably more snappy than the Travis Touch, which if we kind of bring into view and tap on the language list, you can see how scrolling here is a lot more abrupt and you can really see the frame rates drop. That's not really a huge issue considering it's just kind of a very simple device and it doesn't really impede on the functionality, but overall I do feel like the processor and the overall speed and fluidity just feels a bit more premium on this device. The first app, which is Translate, just takes you into that translation again between English and your second selected language. I can swipe over from the side of the screen there to go back. That is a gesture that has been implemented. You can access that same thing though by holding on the talking keys even from the main menu. So just as a quick test right now. Hi, this is a test. Works without any problems. Your speech, which is in English, is going to come from the left side, and then the translated results will come from the right side in terms of the dialogue box. It keeps a running list of all the translations that you've done thus far, just to save that in the memory, but if you don't want to have one, you can long hold and delete it, clear it, or even favorite something. So for example, if this is a phrase I will commonly ask people, I can add it to my favorites list, so that will then be saved and can be easily referenced in the future. Other features here include the aforementioned recording mode, which is really for recording a stream of a conversation, again up to 1 hour instead of back and forth phrases. So it can then be used to transcribe into text for you then to read back later on, which is pretty cool. There's also the photo translate here. To demo that, I actually have a box here from a different product, but it has both English and Chinese. So let's just try and translate the Chinese portion and see how well it does. So I'm going to tap on Chinese text, translate to English. So after it's captured, you can see it's currently scanning the text area here, and then it will just process it. It is a feature that technically we do have on certain smartphone apps, but it's still nice to see it on a dedicated translator unit. It's something that was lacking on the other units. None of them had built-in cameras, so that's a pretty cool and thoughtful additional touch. But anyways, you can see that compared to the English version, it does seem to actually recognize it pretty well. Product model here has been recognized, different codecs, the duration, everything is pretty easy to understand for the most part. The results of the translations here is also pretty accurate. So there is photo translation, and it also saves the photos in the memory, so you can still tap on them in the future to kind of reference those translations. Under favorites, we basically have our favorited translations for easy access in the future. We also have a simultaneous interpretation. So what this does is kind of similar to the recording mode, although it will translate them in real time, but you don't have to keep on pressing keys to translate between two languages. As people talk, it will automatically recognize if someone is talking in, say, Chinese or in English, and then automatically provide the translations on screen for people to read instead of having to press buttons every single time. So it's more of a real-time version of the recording mode. That's nice to have. And then finally, on the last page, we have the study tools, which are for learning a language that I previously mentioned. We have the English study and the Chinese study at the moment. So if we tap on the Chinese study, for example, it sorts it by different chapters, including for elementary, middle, and kind of high school levels. It separates it into different modules, and the first unit here is just saying hello. And this module includes up to 8 different words, kind of like flashcards for you to learn. Down below, we can tap on this speaker here to listen to how that word should be pronounced, and then tap on the middle key here and hold on it to then say the word to test if you're pronouncing it right. 我. In this case, we got an accuracy score of 94%, which is pretty good, and we can move on to the next word. It's turned green. So once all of this is done, you can basically move on to the next lesson. It separates it by different concepts, things like saying hello, and then getting more and more complex about different types of services, counting. So it really is a pretty comprehensive learning system built on N, which is quite neat. There's also an input translation mode, so if you don't want to use voice, you can type things out. Of course, this is not quite as fast because the screen here is very small, but you can just get this tiny little keyboard to appear, and it is using a Google keyboard, but the screen is pretty responsive, supports swipe, and you can tap for it to speak,
谢谢.
and it will read that back out loud to you. So you can use input for typed translations for maybe words that you don't know completely how to pronounce. You can also use photo translation for words, maybe for ads that you're looking at, maybe in a restaurant, a menu. You can also use the voice translation in several different options. Here we also have the offline translation mode, which again supports more limited languages. You can see the list here goes and includes Chinese, English, Japanese, French, German, Spanish, Russian, Korean, traditional Chinese, Portuguese, Italian, and Dutch as the ones that you can use, which are built into the system's memory even if Wi-Fi is turned off. Finally, under settings is where we can take a look at things like turning on or off Wi-Fi. We can also disable Bluetooth, take a look at display options, brightness, things like that. As we touched on, the offline mode is a little bit weaker than using the AI services like Google Translate, Microsoft Bing translation engines, but overall it still does an okay job. It's kind of like a dictionary, so just like what we saw with other devices, it kind of pieces words together, sometimes not in the most natural of ways, especially if you're speaking in a phrase that is specific to a culture, it may get those occasionally wrong. I would say the accuracy in the offline mode is closer to, say, 85%, versus on the connected Wi-Fi enabled mode is closer to, say, 99%. This is a test of the translation functions in the offline mode. It's going to take a few seconds to process. And actually in this case it really wasn't that bad. It seems to have recognized most of the words and it still makes sense. Now we can jump back into the online translation and do a quick demo. How do I get to the grocery store on 2nd Street?
¿Cómo llego al supermercado en la segunda calle?
Again, the accuracy here of the translation still makes perfect sense. And our reply back, gracias, also was captured back without too many issues. So again, it certainly is functional. Accuracy is pretty much the same as the Lingogo and the Travis Touch, which are both already very good as part of the latest generation of smart translators on the market in terms of leveraging the power of Google and Microsoft's machine learning backend services to make this possible. So at the end of the day, I have to say I'm quite impressed with the DoDoDuck 1 being their first smart translator. They've gotten a lot right, from having the best construction quality out of the bunch that I've seen to having the most complete set of features, including photo translation in addition to text translation, and also those learning tools for adjusting your pronunciation for English and Chinese. It definitely has a lot of interesting concepts going for it, coupled at a relatively affordable price. $99 for a smart translator built on Android with a touchscreen is actually quite good in this particular space. Most of the other models sell for at least $200, for example. You can check out more details if interested in the links down below. Definitely, I would say, would be the best value-oriented smart AI translator that I've seen yet, especially here in 2020. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been our closer look at the DoDoDuck 1 Smart Translator.